My name is Itzer Kantav, president of Dusable Heritage Association, a 20-year-old organization that is dedicated to the promotion of the legacy of Jean-Baptiste Pointe Dusable. Hello, frères et sœurs de la diaspora haïtienne et frères et sœurs de la diaspora africaine, nos amis francophones, bien le bonjour. Je suis Itzer Kantav, président de Dusable Heritage Association. C'est une association vieille de 20 ans qui promeut l'héritage de Jean-Baptiste Pointe Dusable, l'haïtien originaire de Saint-Marc, qui a fondé la ville de Chicago, plus de 200 ans. C'est un honneur pour moi de m'associer à cette association et de veiller à ce que la mémoire de Dusable est vénérée ici à Chicago et de par le monde. Et merci de nous supporter dans cette entreprise et restez en contact avec nous, avec Dusable Heritage Association. Et merci beaucoup. À la prochaine. Au revoir.
So this is where it all began. The story of that black man who came from Saint-Marc, Haiti, and went to New Orleans, went all the way along the Mississippi River, and ended up right here in this part of what was becoming the United States. He decided to come from Peoria in Illinois, where we know by 1773 he bought a piece of land. So we know that he was there in Peoria. And then sometimes around 1778, the Americans, the new Americans, what they call them, the Virginians, started moving toward Peoria and took over some of the French villages over there. So Dusable took his family and moved north and ended up here at the mouth of the Chicago River and Lake Michigan. We know that by 1779, he had arrived here because he got arrested by the British around that same year when they suspected him of being too close to the Americans. So, Dusable then was here around 1779, where he built a mansion as well as a number of other houses, a bakehouse, a poultry house, a bound house. So it was a whole settlement, a whole compound that existed here at the time. So between 1779, Dusable lived here for the next almost 20 years. By 1800, he sold his house and his business and left town. But before he did that, he had welcomed a lot of the people coming from Quebec, Canada, some of the French people. We know some of the names. When we hear Wilmette or Beaubien, they all came here and joined the settlement of Dusable. And he lived around here with the Potawatomi Indians, with his wife, who was also from the Potawatomi tribe. So there is a 20-year stretch of history that happened right here as Chicago was being born, taking life, and as Dusable was a very successful business entrepreneur during those 20 years. So we talked about earlier how Dusable came all the way from the Caribbean and ended up right here and built his compound. The question then, after the 20 years that he was here, how did the story end? Well, the story ended right here. This is where Fort Dearborn used to stand. So in 1800, Dusable sells his home, takes his family, and leaves Chicago. And he ended up in Missouri, St. Charles, Missouri, where he died in 1818. Now, historians have been debating, why did Dusable leave Chicago? After building a whole compound and being very successful with his business, why did he leave? Well, we are not sure, but we know what happened after he left. After he left in 1800, by 1803, 1804, the new Americans, they built Fort Dearborn. And Fort Dearborn is considered as the first police station in Chicago. Historians are thinking that Dusable didn't like the idea of having his home across the street from a police station. We need to remember that slavery was still in force in the United States in the early 1800s. So maybe Dusable wasn't comfortable. Fort Dearborn was built here. It was subsequently destroyed by the Potawatomi Indians a few years later, and it was rebuilt several years after that. So that is the story of Fort Dearborn. We are now standing on the southern bank of the Chicago River. Right behind me, you can see the Dusable Bridge that just celebrated its centennial, built in 1920. And of course, across, this is where Dusable had his mansion. The whole stretch from Michigan Avenue all the way to Michigan Lake has been named the Dusable Founders Trail. And so that has a lot of historical significance because this is where Chicago was born. So we're gonna take a walk all along the Founders Trail that will lead us to Lake Michigan and to where the future Dusable Park is located. We're gonna also see the Dusable Harbor. So the whole area is pretty much named after Dusable and is celebrating the birth of Chicago right around here. So one often wonders what life was like at the time of Dusable. He had his home right there and his business, living with his family. He had the river right next to him, and he had the lake. So Dusable understood the strategic importance of this particular corner of the state, where this river would have been filled with different merchant boats coming up and down. As we look now, we see a lot of boats, but they are all for pleasure. But at the time of Dusable, it was all commerce. And we had the ships coming from Europe, going all the way to Canada, and via the St. Lawrence River, they would come down into Lake Michigan and all the way down into the Chicago River and go all the way across and through the Des Plaines River, then the Illinois River, they would reach the Mississippi River. And from there, you could go all the way down to New Orleans. So Chicago was right at the center of this vibrant business, and Dusable understood that he could take advantage of it by having his fur trading post right here in this area. So what do we know about the man himself? There isn't a whole lot written about him. We do know that he was the son of a white French sailor and a black slave mother in Saint-Domingue, Haiti. And we also know that he was handsome. And how do we know that? It is because that was written by the people who dealt with him and even the people who arrested him. They commented on how he was a handsome Negro. So we know that about him. We also know that he was a man of character because after he was arrested and taken to Michigan. He actually, 1 year later, became the manager of the property of the person who had arrested him, and describing how he was a trustworthy man. So we do know those aspects of Dusable. We also know that he was a very entrepreneur with his business that was very successful here. And finally, we know that he dealt with the Spaniards, the French, the British, the Native Americans. So he was a man of all people, and he actually represented the Native Americans with some of their dealings after a treaty that was to displace the Native Americans. He went with them to try to change the terms of that treaty. So those are aspects of Dusable's personality that we can grasp just from reading about what other people wrote about him. So as we look at the river and the real estate around it, it is difficult to imagine what Chicago looked like in 1779 or 1790. Certainly it didn't look like this. Nowadays, not everybody can be a neighbor of Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable. You need to have some cash to be able to afford this kind of real estate. So more and more, this area has developed to become really the center of downtown Chicago. Now, very soon, we are hoping that behind me here, there will be another set of real estate, 2 towers, that are gonna be built by Related Midwest, who is gonna contribute after that for the construction of Dusable Park. So as you look at the Lakeshore Drive here, west of it, you're gonna have the Related Midwest project, and east of it, we're gonna have the future Dusable Park. But we can see how Chicago has evolved from the low-key mansion of Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable to this kind of housing that you are seeing now on both sides of the river. So the Dusable Founders Trail that we spoke about ends actually right here, and that piece of land that you are seeing behind me is the future Dusable Park. And we are hoping that within the next few years, we're gonna actually be able to go there and spend a day reflecting about Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable and teaching the next generation about the story of his life. And then the question then comes to mind, why are we talking so much about Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, and what was so special about him? Is it the fact that he was a black man who founded a city like Chicago? Is it because he was able to get along with everybody and he gave the best example of multiculturalism way before that word existed? Is it because he was such a successful entrepreneur and he actually laid the foundation of the importance, the economic importance of Chicago nowadays? Yes, it is because of all those things. But in my mind, it is more than that. Dusable lived during a stretch of time where the human spirit was really evolving. This started in 1776 with the American Revolution. This continued in 1789 with the French Revolution. And this ended with the Haitian Revolution, which started in 1791 and ended with the independence of Haiti in 1804. So in a stretch of less than 50 years, Dusable witnessed 3 major movements in human history that pretty much changed the face of the earth. And it is important for us to teach that to our children, to understand how Dusable witnessed some of those great movements and what we can learn about this. So in the end, one wonders, how does a black man who was supposed to be into slavery ended up doing all those things, becoming a free spirit, becoming a business entrepreneur, becoming a multiculturalist. That shows us what the power of the human spirit is and what it can do. The story of Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable is truly the story of the triumph of the human spirit. And this is what we are celebrating. We thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure for Dusable Heritage Association to put these two together and to tell the story of this man from his perspective and to join other people in the celebration of his life. My name is Serge Pierre-Louis, and I wish you to come and visit us anytime and take a tour with us along the Dusable Founders Trail.